Oh, that's an awful glare. Okay. Oh god. Alright, so for those of you that were here last week, essentially one of the things we found out was that the front brake was pretty much frozen up. Master cylinder was completely frozen, and the piston in the caliper was also frozen. Reason being, we're pretty sure that the previous owner, 2 owners ago, lived in coastal Alabama, and it had like a lot of like salt, water, air damage. So everything was kind of like rusted, corroded out in there. So one of the things we had to consider was whether we wanted to try to fix that or whether we wanted to go ahead and just buy a whole new front end, which I was going to do anyway. First thing we did is we actually soaked the original master cylinder in some lubricant, and it helped a little bit. We got it apart, but we'd have to kind of rebuild the whole brake assembly if we wanted to, make that actually work. But I did actually go ahead and buy an R1 front end, which we will probably be putting on next week. So second thing we did is we actually went ahead and ran that wire from the starter motor back to the negative terminal on the battery, which involved quite a process actually. We bought a 6-gauge wire from like Advanced Auto Parts or something, and the lugs on that were actually a little bit too big, so we ended up bringing it to the machine shop and drilling out the lugs so that they were a little bit smaller and could fit the bolts, one on the terminal, one on the starter motor. And I may or may not cut in some audio of the engine actually starting, but it syncs up a lot better. The starting sounds way better than it did before, and hopefully we don't actually have to break open the starter motor and try and get all that crap out of there. So that was actually like maybe 45-minute process, just running the wire from the starter back up, around, through to the battery, which I'm going to have to move eventually anyway because I'm going to get a ballistic battery so I can mount it upside down. Story for a different day. Another thing I did is, like I said last week, I had thought that we had a petcock issue where one of them seemed to be working the opposite way, to where when it was on it was acting like it was off. Remounted the fuel tank and looked at that, and it actually looks like there's not really any problem there. I don't know why we got confused about that last week, but it seems to be working fine. Fuel tank looks to be in good order as far as like how it's functioning. I still think I'm going to buy another fuel tank, but one of the main issues is most fuel tanks only have one fuel tap, and I'm not sure if you can just bolt in another petcock. If you can, then that would be great, and I could get something a little bit more aesthetically what I'm looking for. If not, then I'm probably just going to either use a stock Virago tank or a Benelli tank, which I'm not super fond of just because they're really common on Viragos obviously, but it does look good and it does have 2 fuel taps like off the rip, so might as well work with that. Okay, so it's actually been a while since I got that last part done, so actually a lot has happened. First of all, we looked at the petcocks again, and they actually were like completely wrong. I don't know if like the label plates on them were not from the original petcocks or what, but it was just completely wrong, so we like flipped that around, figured out the exact way that they should work, which like was nothing like what the plate was saying that it should have been at, but we figured it out. I also cleaned out the original tank with some bolts and some denatured alcohol, just because there's a little bit of rust in there. I wanted to knock all these, just get a little bit cleaned up for now so we can actually run fuel through the engine without having a disgusting tank. And we actually did get the bike started a little bit, and kind of figured out some technical things we're going to have to work out with that, one of which being it's idling too quickly for a reason that I'll discuss in a second, and another being the choke doesn't really open all the way, which is another problem. But what we did do is we ended up going ahead and swapping the front forks. Like I said, this is actually like 2 weeks after that first part of this video. Part of the reason being that I actually broke my other lens. My camera fell and it was a whole ordeal. And then secondly being that first of all we had to find equipment to go ahead and do the front fork swap. We had to get just parts and basically I've got other stuff going on, so weekly, probably not. Anyways, so swapping your front end was a whole process, first part of which was securing your front end. So I did buy an R1 front end, as I said at the beginning of the video. It was in good condition. The original bike had the engine blow, so there was no problem with the front end. I had to buy a front wheel as well, which was another reason it took so long, is because I didn't buy it originally because I figured the Virago wheel would fit, but it did not. So I had to go back to the original guy, buy the bearing, the wheel, all that crap. Another thing we had to buy is a Cognito Moto basically swap stem. So it's a stem that fits onto the R1 front end but is long enough to fit through the body of the Virago. What that process basically involved was taking the front end off of the original bike, off of the Virago, and just putting all that to the side, stripping the new front end down to the point where it's just the tree and the stem. And then we brought it over to a buddy's house, which I don't have video of, where we used a hydraulic press to press out the original stem, press in the new stem, press on some bearings with an arbor press, which you might see here. I had to pack them with grease, all that crap. Put on the new stem, put it back onto the R1 front forks, and then it basically is just bolt on from there, and it was a pretty easy process. Now I've got a much lower bike with a much more aggressive stance, and it looks pretty freaking sweet. So for this coming weekend, a couple things I can do. First of all, I bought a fuel tank. It's probably not going to work. It's really small and it only has one fuel tap, I think, but it was a really good deal, so I'll probably just sell it on Craigslist. I'm probably going to buy another one at some point, but that may not be for a while. I also may go ahead and buy the subframe and get that worked out, and also go ahead and get a seat. The main mechanical things we're going to work on is we really need to fix that throttle problem. The reason that it's idling too quickly, we think, is because when we swapped out the front end, the throttle had to connect to R1 front end, which is a little bit, it's obviously different from the Virago front end. So we're going to kind of need to measure that up and make sure it's a little bit looser so that it can idle at a more reasonable speed. And then also, while it was running, we were getting a lot of backfire, and one of the reasons that could be happening is because of our issues with the AC coming on in the middle of the video. One of the reasons that could be happening is because of the problem that we're having with the choke. If we can get that to actually open all the way up, it might solve the problem. If not, then it could be a much bigger issue with timing or something, and that's not something that's easily fixed at home as far as my knowledge goes. So that could be an issue. But anyways, hopefully now we can actually start getting to a little bit more aesthetic stuff. We've definitely got the front end down. Like I said, my lens broke, so I know the angle in this video isn't great, but we do have a much better looking bike now, and we can go ahead and get working on some cool stuff. Thanks for checking in. See you next time.